Hello, thank you for listening. My name is Klaus Richter, and I want to tell you a story from a time when I was just 23 years old, though I felt ancient even then. Before the war, my world was quiet. It was ordered. It smelled of old paper and ink in the university library in Dresden. I was a student of geography and philosophy. I believed the world was a series of logical propositions, a collection of lines on a map that could be understood, navigated, and predicted. The curve of a river, the slope of a mountain, the vector of a trade route. It was all a grand, elegant equation. I believed that with enough knowledge, anything could be charted, anything could be solved. The sky to me was the ultimate map, a clean sheet of vellum on which we could draw lines of flight with geometric perfection. The war, however, taught me the terrible, screaming chaos that exists between the lines. People often ask how a thinking man, a student, could find himself in the cockpit of a Messerschmitt, fighting for a cause that the world would come to despise. They expect a complicated answer, a treatise on ideology or duty. But the truth is simpler and much uglier. For me, on a frozen February morning in 1944, all the grand ideas of fatherland and destiny burned away into nothing. It all came down to a single moment, a smear of black smoke against a brilliant blue sky and the face of my friend, which I could see only in my mind. The air on the flight line that morning had teeth. It was a vicious, biting cold that went right through our leather jackets and settled deep in the bones. It was the kind of cold that made steel painful to touch. The ground was a frozen, rutted mess of mud and ice. Our world smelled of gasoline, hot oil, and the faint, nervous sweat of young men pretending to be immortal. I remember stamping my feet, watching my breath plume in the air like exhaust smoke, while I did my pre-flight check on Yellow 4. My 109. She was a temperamental beast, but she was mine. Her lines were sharp, angry. A weapon that had once seemed like a pinnacle of engineering now just felt like a coffin with wings. Hans came jogging over, his grin infuriatingly bright against the grim gray morning. He was my wingman, my Kachmir. We had grown up together on the streets of Dresden, sketching castles and dreaming of adventures. Now we sketched flight paths and dreamed only of surviving. He slapped me on the shoulder, the gesture too loud in the tense quiet. "Just look at them, Klaus," he said, nodding toward the sky. "Clear as glass. A good day for hunting." I grunted, running a gloved hand over the fuselage. "A good day for being hunted. You men." I could hear the weariness in my own voice. Hans, ever the optimist, just laughed. He believed in the romance of it all. Still, the nightly duel in the clouds. I had seen too much to believe in fairy tales anymore. My student's mind was always running the numbers, the terrible calculus of attrition. We had fewer planes, fewer experienced pilots. They had more, always more. It was a logical problem with a fatal, unavoidable solution. The scramble bell shattered the air. A raw, electronic scream that bypassed the brain and went straight to the spine. All thought ceased. There was only reflex. Running. The ground crew already had the crank in the propeller hub. I hauled myself up, swinging into the tight cockpit. The world shrank to this tiny space, a cage of perspex and steel, filled with the smell of my own fear. Straps tight, fuel, oxygen. The chattering of the ground crew outside faded as I slid the canopy shut, sealing myself in. That was the moment the claustrophobia always threatened to rise up, a foul taste in the back of my throat. I swallowed it down. I had a job to do. The Daimler-Benz engine coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life with a gut-shaking vibration. The entire airframe trembled around me, a living thing, hungry. I saw Hans give me a thumbs up from his cockpit, Yellow 5. I nodded back, my face a mask of professional calm I did not feel. Then the tower gave the signal. One by one, our swarm roared down the makeshift runway, lifting off into the frozen air. The ascent was always the best part, a brief reprieve. As we climbed through the thin layer of morning haze, the scarred, winter-brown earth of Germany fell away beneath us. From 5,000 meters, the world became a map again. My map. The forests were dark green patches, the rivers were silver threads, the towns were tiny, smudged clusters. Up here there was a sense of clean, cold order, a god's eye view. I could almost forget the smoke rising from the cities. I could almost pretend this was just a navigational exercise, a problem of wind speed and vectors. For a few precious minutes, I was a student again, observing the beautiful, logical geometry of the world. But the radio brought reality crackling back into my ears. The voice from the ground control station, tinny and strained. Thick fish, fat fish, many fat fish. Course 090. Angels 20,000 feet. We leveled off, the sun a blinding glare to the east. And then we saw them. My breath hitched. It always did. It wasn't a formation. It was a river. A slow, majestic, terrifying river of silver flowing across the sky. B-17s, fortresses, hundreds of them, stretching from one horizon to the other, stacked in combat boxes, glittering in the sun like a swarm of malevolent insects, each one bristling with heavy machine guns, and above them, weaving and glinting, were the escorts, the little friends, P-51s. We called them Indianer, the hunters. My academic mind tried to grapple with the spectacle, the logistics, the sheer industrial might required to put this airborne nation in the sky above my home. It was obscene. It was illogical. A brute force equation with no elegance, only overwhelming power. All our theories of swift, precise aerial combat, all our talk of nightly duels, it was meaningless in the face of this. This was not a battle. This was an avalanche. The Staffelkapitän's voice came over the radio, calm and clipped. Attack from the rear, high. 12 o'clock high. Aim for the lead box. In Sharon lows. Go. We pushed the throttles forward. The engine screamed. The plane vibrated, straining. Hands was glued to my wing, a perfect textbook formation. We were a single entity, two halves of the same weapon. We climbed above the bomber stream, the sun at our backs. Looking down, the fortresses seemed to drift, serene and untouchable. But I knew the truth. Inside each of those silver shapes were 10 men, and every one of them was trying to kill me. We dove. The world dissolved into a blur of speed and noise. The sky, once so vast and open, became a compressed, lethal tunnel. The whistle of the wind over the canopy rose to a shriek. G-forces pushed me down into my seat, my blood turning to lead. My focus narrowed to the lead bomber in the formation below, a giant, four-engined monster growing impossibly large in my gun sight. My thumb hovered over the firing button on the stick. Logic took over. Calculate the deflection. Lead the target. Easy. Just a geometry problem. Then the sky exploded. Not with flak, but with light. Tracers, red and green lines sketching insane patterns all around us. The gunners had seen us. The air was suddenly thick with flying metal. I could hear the distant popping of their 50s, a sound like tearing canvas that you felt in your teeth. I fired. A short, disciplined burst from my cannons. The plane bucked. I saw my shells spark and flash along the bomber's wing. Smoke, black and greasy, began to pour from its inboard engine. A hit, a small victory, but there were hundreds more, an endless supply. Then the Indianer were on us. They fell out of the sun like silver hawks. Fast, deadly. The radio became a cacophony of panicked shouts. It stung. Indianer. Mustang on your 6, brake left, brake. The ordered attack shattered into a dozen individual dogfights. A chaotic melee. The sky was a maelstrom of twisting, turning aircraft. There was no strategy anymore. There was only instinct. Survive. My head was on a constant swivel. Check 6. Where was Hans? There, still there, a comforting, solid presence on my right. We moved together, a practiced dance, weaving through the storm of steel. We found a straggler, a fortress that had fallen behind its formation. Trailing smoke, a wounded animal, an easy kill. We moved in, bracketing it. Hans would take the first pass. I would cover him. It was a textbook maneuver, something we had practiced 100 times. I watched him roll in, his 109 a sleek gray shark. Then I saw it, A flicker, a glint of sunlight high and to the right. A single P-51, dropping like a stone. He was coming for hands. He was fast, too fast. My throat went dry. I screamed into the radio. Hands, brake right Mustang high. Time seemed to stretch, to become thick like molasses. I saw the Mustang's nose wink with light. A stream of tracers, impossibly bright, reached out across the small distance and touched Hans's plane. It wasn't a dramatic explosion like in the newsreels. It was worse. It was methodical. The shells stitched a line of glittering holes along his fuselage. Right behind the cockpits, a puff of glycol coolant vaporized into a white cloud, and then a flicker of orange. Fire. Black smoke began to pour from his engine, thick and oily. His plane, my friend's plane, did not spiral. It continued on for a moment, as if nothing had happened. A ghost ship. I flew alongside, helpless, screaming his name into the radio. Hands, get out, bail out, jump. There was no reply, only static. I could see the flames now, licking back from the engine cowling, engulfing the cockpit. The perspex canopy began to blacken and bubble, and I thought of him in there, trapped in that tiny, tight space, the straps, the controls, burning, the exact fear that haunted my own nightmares, playing out right in front of me. The claustrophobic terror, the fire. I felt a scream building in my own chest, a raw, animal sound of pure horror. The canopy never opened. Yellow 5, the plane he had been so proud of, nosed over gently and began its long, final dive. A funeral pyre falling through the sky. My training, my discipline, every logical impulse screamed at me to get back in the fight, to reform with the swarm. But I couldn't. I just followed him down, watching the trail of smoke get thinner as he fell. The great battle, the river of bombers, the fate of Germany, it all vanished. It meant nothing. The only thing in the universe was that falling black line. It hit the ground in a field dusted with snow. A brief, silent flash of orange, and then just a rising column of black smoke. A dirty smudge on my beautiful, logical map. Something inside me broke. The student died. The philosopher died. The cartographer died. All the lines and equations turned to ash. A cold, clean, perfect rage filled the void. It was not a hot anger. It was glacial. It was absolute. The war was no longer an abstract concept. It was not about defending the Reich. It was about the man who had just murdered my friend. I pulled back on the stick, my movements sharp, vicious. I scanned the sky not for bombers, but for a Mustang. Any Mustang. I found one climbing away, its pilot probably congratulating himself. I pushed my throttle through the gate, into emergency power. The engine howled in protest. I didn't care if it tore itself apart. I didn't care if I died. All that mattered was the hatred. The geometry of the attack was gone. There was only a straight line. Me and him. He saw me coming. He broke hard, but I was pure vengeance. I stayed on his tail, my sight picture a mess, my hands shaking. I fired. I held the button down, emptying my cannons, my machine guns, sending a torrent of steel across the sky. I saw hits all over his fuselage. He trailed smoke and dove away, and I let him go. The rage was spent. I was empty, alone in the sky. My fuel gauge was low. My ammunition was gone. And the space on my wing, where hands should have been, was a void, a hole in the world that could never be filled. I spent the rest of my life working with maps, teaching geography at a small college after the war. But I never again believed that everything could be fixed or understood. Before that day, the sky was a chart, a thing of beauty and logic. After Hans died, it was just empty space between me and the ground. I learned that the lines we draw on maps, borders, flight paths, battle plans, they are illusions of order. The real story, the true geography, is written in the blood that soaks into the paper and makes all the lines run together. People talk about fighting for a cause, for grand ideas. After that day, my cause was the memory of my friend's burning cockpit. My war became a very small, very personal thing. It was not for the fatherland, not for any flag. It was for the empty space to my right. You learn in war that the grand ideas are the first things to burn away. In the end, all you are left with is the man next to you. And when he is gone, you are left fighting for a ghost. This memory is a piece of shrapnel I carry. It's heavy. Help me carry it. Subscribe and ensure these stories are never left to rust in silence.